Okay, we have here...
I'm Ramsey Moore.
Mike Tsirklin.
They're writing partners.
We're writing partners, and we perform together, stand up together, and we've written several scripts. A couple have gotten produced, and we're working on several projects together now.
Let's start with Ramsey. Tell me your history, on a little bit of your history.
Well, I got into stand-up comedy right out of college, and then a couple years after that, I decided to. I got into screenwriting and started writing screenplays, and then wrote several plays that got produced in Chicago. One got produced in New York, and then at that point, then my acting started to take off a bit. So then I switched to starting writing stuff that only I could star in, and that's one of the movies that we got produced.
Which one was that?
The Lenny Bruce Experiment. You know, we had backers for it, and we're going to have it finished. We're submitting it to South by Southwest in a week.
Okay, so it's in the can, but it's not released yet.
It's in the can, but it's not released yet.
Okay, good. Congratulations. What do you think attracted you to screenwriting first off?
Well, I think when I was in high school and college, I was a creative writer. Like, I wrote poems and I wrote short stories, and screenwriting always seemed a little bit daunting to me because I came into screenwriting when there wasn't all these programs where you could, put it so it seemed like an inordinate amount of, just getting the words on the right spaces on the page seemed daunting, and it seemed easier just to write, short stories or novels or something like that than to write screenwriting. But a friend of mine said if you want to act, you're eventually going to have to write something for yourself, because that's the only way you get any kind of traction in show business.
Right.
So then I decided to write a play because I knew I could get a play produced, because a guy named Wayne Rada said, if you write a play, I'll produce it, which was unheard of, because normally you can write plays for years and maybe you'd be lucky to have someone read them, but here's a guy unseen said if you write a play. So the first year when I moved from Dallas to Chicago, the first winter hit, and winters in Chicago are brutal. I was born from Florida, never really dealt with that. So I quit my job and just stayed inside for about 60 days and wrote my first play. It's a play called Fat Guys Dating, where, it was ridiculous. There was like 17 speaking parts and 4 stages. But what was funny about it was the way we performed the play is exactly how they perform sitcoms, where the actors just move from set to set and the audience kind of leans in different directions. So that won an award in Chicago, and that ended up leading to a writing job that took me to New York when there was the explosion of all the .coms. And that's how I got to New York, and then eventually that's what brought me out here to California. And then once again we were doing where I had gotten some decent acting parts, but nothing that was like really substantial. So they said, well, come up with an idea that you can star in. So then by that time I'd become friends with Mike, and we'd done some sketches, and we did a group called the Real Potheads in North Hollywood, which was kind of satire of the reality genre, and we're still doing that. And we decided that if we could take the pieces we had, which was stand-up comedy and doing tours and whatnot, and just write a movie around that. And that's how we started the Lenny Bruce Experiment. And it was great, because once we sent people the script, people were like, well, how much would it cost to shoot this? And it went almost directly from the concept into production, which is, when I say production, I mean very low end. I mean, the whole production is probably $150,000 by the time we're all said and done. But in fact produced, and we got to film it, and it was just the creative process of collaborating with someone and going back and forth. I recommend it to anyone that ever wanted to write something.
And it's usually comedies you do?
Well, the movie we actually wrote turns out to be a horror film. So, ironically, almost everything, very few of the things I've written that have been produced have been comedy. Fat Guys Dating was a tragedy. The Real Potheads of North Hollywood's a comedy. But the Lenny Bruce is essentially a horror film. And then there's a couple of dramas that we've worked on that people are looking at.
Okay.
But they have, all of them have comedic elements. Schindler's List has jokes in it. I guess my writing style is, I think about character and story more so than comedy or action or whatever, because that's how my life is.
Right. Right. Okay. Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to screenwriting.
Well, I used to be a high school math teacher in the South Bronx for about 9 years, but after my second year of doing it, I started doing stand-up comedy, and I started writing my own jokes, and started getting into start writing an act and all that. And writing an act is telling a story, so that's how I got into telling stories. And after a few years, I quit my day job in New York and moved out here. I met Ramsey probably about 5 years ago. About 3 years ago, we started writing The Real Potheads of North Hollywood, which is our web series. And from that, we have another offshoot web series called Harder Knocks, where Ramsey plays the head coach of the New York Jets. So we've been producing web series, been writing for that, and then we wrote a movie for The Real Potheads. Hopefully one day it'll be produced, taking the characters and making a 2-hour movie. They go on a little venture. And it's just, as a kid, I grew up watching tons of TV. I was a TV junkie. My day was based on what was on TV. So I always loved TV, and I loved movies. I grew up, and my parents are Russian immigrants. They never knew the rated R thing. So I was seeing that. I was telling Ramsey I was seeing Porky's when I was like 6 years old in the movie theater. I actually ran out of Porky's because of the one scene where the black dude is chasing all the kids when they're trying to scare them with the machete. I ran out, but I remember I never knew what was age appropriate. That never occurred to me until later on when I started growing up and realizing this stuff. So I've always loved TV, always loved movies, and I love storytelling. So it makes sense. And collaborating with Ramsey, we just finished writing a script and a treatment for the Pothead Master, which is to summarize it. It's basically a kung fu story. But
it's an action movie.
It's a TV show. It'd be a TV show. It'd be like Kung Fu, the TV show. But our protagonist, he can only fight when he's high on weed. He's kind of like a Popeye on weed. Right. So that's part of the story. And we use a lot of hippie, lore. Grateful Dead are big. So and that stuff. Again, I pull from stuff that I know. I was a huge Dead fan growing up. Huge. Again, watch Saturday. 5 hours of Kung Fu Theater, if you guys remember that, it was on, so I do, like I said, if you write from stuff, it's always going to be, come from a better place. It's always going to sound more legitimate and stuff.
What movies or TV shows do you think inspired you directly in what you're doing now?
The two movies, obviously my two comedic movies would be Caddyshack and Airplane. And both, two comedies and both very different. One's, slapsticky, one's, so those are the two movies I would say that influence, my comedy. That's, you look at TV shows. What did I grow up watching? Every kid of my generation grew up with Saved by the Bell. The cheesiness of it, and the laughing, the jokes and all that stuff. And through the years, I watched MASH with my dad. He used to love MASH. I remember watching MASH, growing up. That was another one. And that one, you get a little further in because it's also like comedy, but it's also like Ramsey said, it's comedy, but it's also with a purpose. You're dealing with the Korean War, people dying, and all that kind of stuff, while they're yucking it up. So there's comic relief, and I realize, comedy. It cures. It's easy to say, but again, people laughing, and it's like your chance to brighten up the world in some kind of way. There's something's going on. You find some kind of humor in it.
Right.
You hope to
put a bright side on something. What about you, Ramsey?
Well, ironically, the movies that really clicked with me as a kid was the Bob Fosse Lenny movie with Dustin Hoffman, and then Tom Hanks and Sally Field in Punchline. Those are the only two VHSs that I owned for a long time.
Yeah.
And my mother was always very concerned that I only liked movies where the people she called were losers. And then she was even more concerned when then I added Raging Bull and Citizen Kane to that, and then The Hustler, and then I started getting into really weird, quirky, 70s movies like Simon and. I think the first legitimate comedy I became obsessed with was The In-Laws with Alan Arkin and Robert Falk. Because what I liked about that movie is it was the first comedy I'd ever seen where I literally could not pick what was going to happen next. But then when you realize in real life, it's the unknown. Someone first time you're in their house or whatever, and they go, "Here, let me show you my collection of," you don't know if it's gonna be pictures of their kid or Hitler plates or something. You're just, but that's the joy of that movie.
Right.
And then I found myself, I love, like, because comedy is like the most diverse. There's very highbrow comedy, like some of the Python stuff, and then there's just Airplane and Hot Shots Part 2 and movies that I'm not saying they're moronic, but they just allow you not to think and to sit there and laugh. It's sort of like, we have these kids running around, and there's something soothing about it because there's no real plan for these kids, today.
Right.
I mean, they're running around, they'll fall down, they'll bang into a tree. Either way, it's assuming they don't get actually injured. It's hilarious, And then even if they did get injured, as long as it wasn't a permanent injury, it would kind of be even funnier,
And what Ramsey's talking about, like, to me, writing comedy, like he says, highbrow versus, you got different types of comedy. And I think comedy itself is just such a primal thing. That's what makes it, like,
either it's funny or it is not.
Yeah, and I'm a stand-up comic, and I know this for a fact that writing comedy is just hard. Like, we could all write stuff that's going to make people cry. You put it, somebody died, his grandmother died on his birthday. You're going to find stuff that's going to make probably 98% of the people cry. Maybe you find the guy that hated his grandmother. He's not going to cry at that. But you're not going to find a joke that's going to make 98% of the people laugh.
Right.
You're not going to do that. And that's what makes it so challenging to me versus writing drama. Like, we're joking around. We were writing the Pothead Master. It has to be a TV series, so it has to have some, it has to have connections. You can't just, it can't be jokes. It's got to be building up. So we had to, create, like, the protagonist and antagonist were actually related. It turns out that's what will be revealed throughout the series. So this is drama. So this, you can write this kind of stuff, and to me, it's like 100. I don't say 100 times easier, but it's definitely easier to add dramatic elements and make things, But to write a joke, that's you got to be
that everyone's going to find funny.
You got to be some sort of you got to. I'm not going to say a genius, but you got to be. It's a little more difficult, if that's, you decide, all right, I want to be a comedy writer, I want to make people laugh, and I want to do this, and you see it, like, you look at a guy, you look at a guy like Dave Chappelle, who was on top of the world, and then all of a sudden walks away from TV, because it's not easy being on that level for so long, like, you can't, everybody knocks Saturday Night Live, like, oh, now it's awful, it's horrible, but I mean, been doing it for, like, how long they've been doing it, and it's not easy writing comedy. And now with
the genius of Saturday Night Live is everybody watches that show since it started in 1975.
Yeah. Everybody
watched that show, and half the audience goes, "Man, I could do better comedy than they have on that show." But that's what causes them to, it's sort of like the most popular sports teams are not ones that are in the Super Bowl every year. It's the ones that almost get there, because everyone goes, "Man, if they just made that one different thing, they would win." And that's what SNL goes. It's always like, watch it. It's like, whereas like a Mad TV or something, like, I watched that show and I never liked that show. I just, it always seemed like whatever wrong choices SNL was making, Mad TV was making more of them.
And now with this, with another thing is why we started writing what we did. Like, we did the Real Potheads, our own, and we do this, Harder Knocks. We do our own thing. Is this political correctness has gone so out of control. Like, forget about the First Amendment. It's killing everything. You asked me about TV shows. Another one that popped in my head where you talk about, political correctness. All this is all in the family. Like, I can't imagine, like,
that show would not get greenlit.
Yeah,
today.
Exactly. 2012.
There's no sex appeal.
2012.
There's no
you're gonna have
Asians,
this
there's no gay people.
White middle-aged man, cracking wise about every race. But he got his. I thought, like, he was very, like, the way they did it was, he says some obnoxious things, but he always comes out as the jackass at the end. He was wearing the hat, like, like you say this about the black guy, and then,
if anything, you can see the artists that I really like, Wes Anderson and P.T. Anderson and stuff, like, the second they're given a certain level of autonomy, their art becomes much better. Like, compare Louie, the show on FX now, and it's amazing. Compare that to Pootie Tang. Well, Pootie Tang, he had nothing but executives giving him input. Louis, he doesn't take input from anybody. He took a pay cut. He took everything just to have that. And you know what? The show's amazing.
Right.
Because there's not all these things. And if there's anything I would say, the hardest thing to do in terms of being a writer, the writing side of the entertainment business, is to stick to your convictions. Because what I see is a lot of people, and we've had mutual friends, they get a little bit of heat on them, and they get a development deal, and there starts being a lot more money thrown on the table. But then their great idea has input from an executive producer, from a studio head, from their agent, from their girlfriend, or some girl they met at Starbucks, and then pretty soon their vision is no longer a vision. Their vision is a very flimsy suit, and everybody else has an opinion about it.
Right.
The only thing you could ultimately sell as a writer is your viewpoint. And if it's watered down, then why would they choose you over the 14 other guys that are out there in the waiting room?
Why do you think? Because the biz is like that. Is that they just mangle up the writers thing. What keeps you going even despite that?
I mean,
blind faith.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I would say with Ramsey, I mean, it's.
Sometimes that's what it is.
I worked in another field. I worked in education for a long time. I worked at some good schools, and whatever. And I think it's a business. Like everything, education's a business. Entertainment's a business. Entertainment's a business, but it's also just there's so much more. Money and everything's at stake. Education, we don't see it that way, but so. And the same thing in education. I feel like what Ramsey's saying is like, here is a young writer. He wrote this great screenplay. He's got an executive producer. He's got a director. All these people want to justify their jobs. So they justify their jobs. Like,
and they're not bad people.
And they're not bad people, but they want to justify their jobs and they want to be part of the vision. So they could, that he met in camp 10 years ago. Let's make her like a black lesbian. They were in high school together, and she tutored him in English or something. Like there you go. There's one change, and then you come along. You're like, all right, well, I'm the producer or whatever, and I think this should go. So it's everybody's like wants to be, add their input because everybody's got to justify their job. That's why I feel like a lot of people, and it's the same thing like feel in every field. If I worked in education for a long time, so I could say that there was so many people. Like I had administrators, I had principals, I had this math trainer, and I had this person, and they all wanted to justify their job. So and I could have presented the best lesson plan that the world had ever seen, but they can't say it was the best lesson plan because then why would I need my math coach, and why would I need my head of my math department? Why would I need the vice principal? Why would I need 25 people?
Did you have that in the Lenny Bruce movie?
No, we didn't.
Well, we had some of that.
A little bit. Because
we had an initial draft, and there was a lot more money on the table. But those people were they wanted to make Evil Dead 2. And if you're going to make Evil Dead 2, you got to have a huge budget. Otherwise, why make it?
Right.
I remember seeing like a studio note that said, on our first couple scripts, that said, all the laughs in Lenny Bruce come from dialogue. Shouldn't they come from gags? ?
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, the whole idea of it was most of the, because it's a horror film where you don't really see the horror. So the horror part comes from people's reaction from the dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
If you start trying to go and do like, Sam Raimi type gags, but they're on a little budget, everyone's going to sit there and go, that is the crappiest exploding head I've ever seen. And that's all they'll fixate on. So we did have to kind of pull out, downscale, change the concept, and kind of come back. And then when we came back with the concept, then the people were going, oh, I get this, I love this, and then they greenlight that. I literally had a couple friends of mine, their brothers, screenwriters, named they're Matt and John Ewan, and they were the two guys that were the Asian guys that were in Observe and Report, and they told me about how they had been submitting all these different scripts. And then the movie comes out, and they had some heat around them. So they got a call from one of the studios, and they said, do you have any this particular type of film? And they go, oh, yeah, we've submitted to that to you like a year ago. And, then they even pulled out the email. And you turned it down flat. And they go, oh, well. And they go, have you done a rewrite on it? And they're like, they look at each other. They go, oh, of course. So they pulled off the front page, and they said revision as of that date. Send it back in. And the same people that had said flat out rejected it a year before go, we love this. When can we meet about optioning? So that's the other aspect that comes is you go about your business and you're doing this and you have these stories and these scripts and they're like your children, and then after 10 years of everyone going, your children are morons and we don't like them and please don't bring them back, then almost unexpectedly and not with any notice, suddenly everyone loves everything that comes out of your, everything you write. And there's a certain, and I think that's why a lot of people, lose their vision and get misguided, is because then then they immediately want to go away from the stuff that got them there because they associate that with the stuff that was not successful. And they start trying to make it, versus if you have a legitimate story and a legitimate vision, then money shouldn't change that. The only thing that only the money would change is the gags are bigger, and instead of some girl you met in acting class, you get Rachel Weisz. If you're lucky enough to get you get Uma Thurman to play the thing instead of the girl at Coffee Bean. That's what money changes. Instead of shooting in, Palmdale, you're shooting in, Big Sur or something like that. That's the main thing that changes.
Do you think, to play devil's advocate though, do you think you guys would write, if you knew that $100 million hit, you would write that $100 million hit even if you didn't like it?
If someone put $100 million on the table or whatever the screenwriter gets for that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
$1 million.
Yeah, you would have to, because unfortunately, the way the system goes is your integrity can be bought, and the second your car rolls past the Los Angeles County sign, you're no longer writing just for the sake of it. Otherwise, you'd be doing regional theater in Buffalo.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure between all of us sitting here, we can list how many crappy jobs we've had. Mm-hmm. And writing. I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not.
But you don't look at the $100 million as if for sake of. If you're really an artist, and maybe I'm sounding condescending there, but if you're an artist, I look at the $100 million. Someone give you $100 million and to write that movie it's not the act that I'm writing a movie I don't like. What I'm doing is I'm funding 10 projects I do, because that's what if you can see the people. They'll do this for, they'll be in a huge budget action movie, but then when they get a chance, look at Patton Oswalt and look at Zach Galifianakis. They're in big budget movies. They're in big budget TV. So they could do, The Hangover 3, 4, 5, but they still go and do, Big Fan, and they still go do Visionaries, and, they get to do more of their movies they wanted to do as long as I've known them. They said, if I could do any movie, this would be the movie. Well, I remember Patton Oswalt saying that 10 years ago, and that movie was Big Fan. Mm-hmm. So now, because of him on different TV shows and him just being awesome, now he gets to do the movie he wanted to do. So that's how you look at, it's technically still selling out, because if someone said, do you want to come write Hot Shots Part Trey? Mm-hmm. I don't know a screenwriter in town that would turn down $1 million check to write something like that. Maybe their heart wouldn't be in it, but you just make it's fun, but you look at it, now I can fund X, Y, and Z.
Exactly.
Plays produced, we had that produced.
We shot a pilot.
We
We had Ron Jeremy, Kato Kalin, part of, we have it, it lives online now, and we have people now come back to it, oh man, this is hilarious, how come nobody ever did anything with it, and whatever.
We got paid to do essentially a presentation for a movie called Barry Burbank, Trainer at Large. They paid us to do that. It never got made. There's a lot of stuff that you gets optioned or you get paid for that never sees the light of day.
And we were working with Perfect Vodka to do a viral campaign just with their
we got close.
Their end funding fell through, but they were on board. We were right there. So.
But all of these don't pay all the bills.
No,
you work 9 to 5.
No, I work not right now. I'm working for Obama. I've been just trying to help him get out the vote and raise money for that. We both do stand up and we'll travel for that.
I supplement it, because you're living, how many people say, you're living your dream. I don't have a family. I don't have any real responsibility besides taking care of myself and paying the bills. So you find stuff I right now I substitute teach, all at different spots in LA. It's not great work, whatever, but pays the bills, and then, you pick up stand up gigs here and there. So you do enough, and then, one day, hopefully...
in the years where you make money acting or the screenwriting stuff, there was 4 years where I didn't have to work a day job. Mm-hmm. But then, the money goes and the stuff doesn't quite work out. You have to go... So it's always a cycle.
It's off and on.
It's off and on. And I find it's ironically, you think when you have all this free time, you're going to get so much more done, but it doesn't really always pan out that way.
Let me ask you this. Being that it's off and on, it's not secure.
Right.
A couple of questions here.
Sure.
Do you think, are you having fun with it?
A lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah, I've done stuff. Last spring I was on a USO tour. I went to not Bahrain. I went to Djibouti, Africa. I went to Oman. I went to Saudi Arabia. And never, if you would have asked me, 10 years ago, would you have been doing this? Would you have been traveling to military bases, seeing, all this tops, meeting with generals? I met with one of the generals who was third in line from Obama, that's the chain of command, how it works. He's the head of the whole theater out in the Middle East. So you don't think when you're teaching math in the South Bronx that, okay, one day you're going to be sitting down with generals and telling jokes in front of 400 soldiers and flying. So yeah, of course, I've definitely, I've had fun, as there have been some, but it's also, I've paid for it. I'm from New York. I don't see my family, only a couple times a year.
My family's all East Coast. I see
wonder
them maybe once a year.
If I was teaching, if I was still full-time, sure, I'd be married by now. Maybe I would have had kids. So, there's definitely sacrifice.
That's what you miss. My brother has got a great wife and a great kid, and, and he's like, but he's envious of what I'm doing. It's one of the things he misses is every day is different. I got to go work with Arnold Schwarzenegger on a couple things. I got to, hang out with Jimmy Kimmel, or I've called him from places. He's like, "How did you even get in that room?" And I go, "Well, they called me."
We saw our friend. We were hanging out backstage with our friend with Jay Leno on Leno's show about a month ago. Yeah, on the Tonight Show, Leno came back. Met Tsirklin. So that's stuff, and like he said, people are envious of us. I have a friend who's got two twin girls, beautiful. They're 5 years old. And he owns his own company now. But he tells me how envious he is of me. He's like, if you ever stop doing what you do, I don't know.
All my friends from college, they call me up.
Yeah, we're like the connection to you're that guy. We could be. You could say one day when you're watching TV, hey, that's my buddy, and he didn't give up, and and it's a great story. But hey, and you look at guys, one of my heroes in the business is Rodney Dangerfield. And he was on Stern once before he died, and he was talking about how he used to sell aluminum siding. That's how he paid his bills. Sold aluminum siding, and he didn't get recognized until he was well into his 40s. So, he's telling Howard how he would sell aluminum siding by his real name, whatever his real name was. And he said one night his customers would be watching Ed Sullivan's show and be like, "Hey, that's the guy who sold me aluminum siding." And that could happen. And you could look at a guy like Rodney, who's to me, one of the top comics ever. And he's another guy. All right, he paid his dues, and he sold aluminum siding, and he didn't get recognized until he was well into his 40s. So that's why, as a comic, I know I'm not an actor, because if I was just purely an actor, I'd know, hey, you're gonna, I'm 37 now, I'm a couple of years from 40. Who's gonna, I haven't really booked anything major, so I'm not working on a career here where somebody's gonna be like, all right, now he's 40, let's throw him in some TV show or movie,
Do you have anything where you go, well, I wish I would have done this or that? Or
I wish
in a different direction?
Well, the only direction that I wish that somewhere along the way I'd made one of those. There was a couple of wonderful women that I was involved with. I wish I'd made that work, because I wish I had kids right now. I really, truly do wish that. But in terms of career, I've had a number of careers. This is the career that I don't dread going to work. I used to make a lot of money in sales, but I woke up with a Vicodin and a shot of whiskey.
I know it sounds a little, obviously everything we do is self-centered, egotistical, we're very self-absorbed. But that's everybody is. But
everybody is. Writers and artists are just more honest about it.
I feel like Ramsey, some of the people I know, if we were alive, 400 years ago, we'd be boarding ships to go with, explore the world with Magellan and Christopher Columbus. Be like, all right, we're on that, because I feel like that's in our DNA. Our DNA wasn't to be, if we were alive 500 years ago, it wasn't to be the blacksmith, it wasn't to be,
You didn't want to be a haberdasher.
Yeah, we weren't those guys. We weren't. If they were,
we might die in a crusade.
Yeah, I don't know if we'd necessarily be Christopher Columbus, but maybe we were on his crew. Maybe when he was putting his crew together, they were like, all right, who's in? Because there's something in us. In this day and age, we're not going off to explore, far off lands. So maybe now it's all right. Let's try to conquer this, because everybody looks at oh man, if you could get into entertainment, you could be the biggest star, you can make millions of dollars, you could have, You know, you conquer this world, you know, this entertainment world.
But do you have, like Ramsey said, do you have any regrets on where you've been now, or?
No, I don't have regret. I mean, there's been a couple times where I was like, you know, if it wasn't for stand-up, it wasn't for this, I think it's like saved my life, you know, like in certain respect, it saved my, you know, it's definitely made me happier. Like when I had Crohn's disease when I was 17. When I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease when I was 17, and for years, for years I couldn't, like, you look at right now, I weigh about, you know, 210, 215, but when I was in college, I got down to like 140, and it was nothing to do with disease, but I was depressed because I was sick. It was like, you know, it's like this is, you know, and to me, you know, I never felt normal. You know, even before I was sick, I never felt like normal. Like, what's wrong? Like, I always saw things differently. You know, but I tried to, you know, follow the path. Like, all right, I went to school, I got my degree, I started teaching right out of college and stuff like that, and then I got sick again. And I took a class, and it was like, I read an ad in the Village Voice that says, what sense could make you money? It says your sense of humor. I'm like, all right, this is great, because I've thought about stand-up for years, but I never thought, like, I just don't, you know, I'm funny in situations. Like, we're all sitting here, we're, you know, shooting the shit and talking about last night, and then Ramsey said something, and I could jump in and say, oh, man, and we're all laughing at that. Like, that's, you know, when we're being witty, that's one thing, but to go up and to have a room full of strangers laugh at you is another thing. I just didn't know, you know, joke structure, all that, so I took the class and slowly got into that, and then finally I understood why I wasn't normal. I wasn't normal because I was a comic. I was a comic, and I saw things differently. Like, you gotta, if you see the world one way, and you see, like, you know, 90% of the world sees it, then how can you comment on it? How can you say what is wrong with it? And it's like our job is, like, if something's wrong, you know, like, it's our job to say, oh, this is call foul, call bullshit, and tell people, like, hey, man, this is not what's going on in the world. Like, this is, you got to look at it like this, you know, we're modern day philosophers almost, you know, like, you know, this is people come to hear what we've got to say, and it's POV, and in comedy, and you see the comics that you really like, the comics that people, like, get behind, like that Fonz, you know, Dave Attell, Louis C.K., Chris Rock, they all have POVs, like their own POV. Right. You know, a guy like Carrot Top, not throw him under the bus, who's not, you know, and he's not respected.
He's a very nice guy. He's an
entertainer. He's an entertainer, but he's not a comic. He's an entertainer, so I'll give him that. Because like, what's his POV that he doesn't, you know, that he could put together like two objects and make it something else. Like,
I think we all sat through Chairman of the Board.
Yeah. So he's an entertainer. So he's not like, I want to be a comic. I want, you know, you might not agree with me, but at least you say, okay, I see his POV. Like, I know what.
How many jobs and how many offices could you walk into and say to the people legitimately there, if they didn't pay you, would you be here? I mean, if you think about that, I mean, sales job, doctor, lawyer, teacher even, if they didn't pay you, I mean, because ultimately, if we had what legitimate collectivism, where everyone was paid the same, we just got to choose what we wanted to do, how many people would choose what they currently do? Right. I remember I was in sales, and they were always luring me in with the bonus of this, and they were always trying to say, well, you have all this money, you should buy a house, you should buy a nicer car, and, you know, and then almost like this one boss put a thought in my head. He goes, a mortgage and all this, what's keeping you here? And then my thought was, you're right. You know, it had the exact opposite of the reaction he thought. It was like, you're right.
Yeah, and it goes back to what he's saying, like how many people would do what they would do if they didn't get paid. I'm not that altruistic. I wouldn't go in and teach kids in the morning. I wouldn't deal with that BS.
Especially those kids.
Yeah, especially those kids. And then how many, like, you think about if I told you stand-up comedy, like at first, some open mics even charge. Like, so that you're just, now you got young comics who are paying to perform. And then, you know, if you want to be a writer and you want to do it for real, like, you take classes, so you're paying to learn the process and all that. And for years, it could be...
And the only thing you really own is your time. So as a writer, even if you're not paying for anything, you're still... The hours you spend thinking about that, or hours you're not spent thinking about your wife or global warming or something like that. So it's a job. It's just... It doesn't necessarily have the same structure. But some people choose to spend all their time thinking about what's going on with the Real Housewives of Orange County versus, you know, when you're doing a script, you become either a really exciting person to other people or, frankly, really boring, because when they ask you a question, what are you thinking about? Well, I'm thinking about, we've got this scene where the pothead master is stuck in an elevator, and what's an interesting way he can get out of that, when the door opens and the bad guys are there. And that's what I'm thinking about. Even if I'm walking around like Target or, IKEA, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about, well, what's an I'm constantly thinking about, what's a unique way to kill someone you've never seen?
It's amazing. Yeah, it's like you got blinders on, and for certain of us, like to me, before
and for the people in our lives, sometimes that is a burden.
And just for a person like me who's very sensitive to like what his surroundings are, like what's going on, in New York with Sandy, what's going on in the Middle East with the war, what's going on with people losing their jobs. So it's like it's almost now. I could focus that on my writing. I could use my writing as and anybody who writes, and it's really about for themselves, really.
Your writing is definitely it's an art of self-discovery, and it's like, and you look at the script, and that's one of the things that's different about writing versus acting or stand-up or some of the other stuff is, at the end of the day, you still have these scripts, and even if you get hit by a bus, your wife, your dad, somebody's going to find these scripts, and someone will have, either read them, or just the fact they exist is something that you put into the world that wasn't previously there. The way you told your rom-com about the guy at the bus station is different than everybody else told, and that's what's exciting about it.
Yeah, it's your chance for immortality.
Now, what they'll bring for the real life thing here, because there's a lot of benefits to writing and being a creative person.
Right.
Absolutely. But I think the world would be a drastically different place if everybody could choose what they wanted to do, and everybody's choice is a valid choice. But just from my perspective, the unfairness of the world puts the dollar on a lot of things. It puts a lot of pressure on you. Now, I have to assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, you guys don't have a wealth of savings or a great...
Not now. Not now. At one point,
Now, ultimately, my question is, are you okay in 20, 25 years if it's an on-off thing and you're still doing what you want to do and you're enjoying it? Do you think your perspective would be different in 20, 25 years?
I think it'll be different in the sense that at some point you have to spend more effort on stuff you don't want to do. But in the end of the day, at the end of the day, I would have, in say 25 years, I'd have hopefully like 4 or 5 movies, maybe a TV show, or just the scripts from those. Mm-hmm. Now, how is that any different than the guy that's over there right now wearing a 3-piece suit and he's working in an office and he's making money, man, and he's trading and he's throwing money into a 401k and he's throwing money into this and he's investing in this, and he can look on his thing and go, wow, I'm worth $1 million today, and then suddenly the economy crashes, the company goes under, and he's got nothing. Now, at the end of the day, say 25 years from now, he's broke and I'm broke, all right? But he's a lot more pissed off because he was trading all of his time for that chunk of money at the end, whereas I'm trading my time to be able to create these works of art that may or may not be produced.
Okay.
You can lose in the end either way, and it's probably financially, it's a stupid bet. But if you have to have a certain level of blind faith in yourself that, 25 years from now, if I was having to be homeless or whatever because I made these choices, I could live with that.
Okay.
Because you could just as widely be homeless investing in a taco stand.
Yeah.
You agree?
I totally agree. I mean, there is, like I've said to myself, when I'm going to be 40, could I live the way I'm living right now? That question comes, but then again, I've lived, like, what am I going to do? Like, I don't want to, like, I know I would not be happy teaching. If I took a teaching job when I was 40, I wouldn't be happy working for the next 20-something years. Teaching at least because the way I was doing it before, like I just it wasn't like my passion, so does that become my passion? Who knows? Maybe if there's a family involved, maybe if I have a kid that I've realized right now I got responsibilities, I have to, so maybe that'll be more. But I'm not worried about that now. Like, I'm not, like, because like Ramsey said, like, there was, him and I both have similar backgrounds because we came from a place
where we were making
money. Like, I was making, working 10 months a year. I was working in New Rochelle, which is in Westchester County. It's a good school district. I was making $67,000 a year. I had my own apartment. I sold the apartment, and that's how I funded my first couple of years of doing this, and now I've been out here for almost 6 years now, so it's, that money's been long gone. But still, it's just money, and if you put so much, that's what you have to realize is your time is the most important thing. So say I did have a family. But, if I had 3 kids, but I had to be working, 60 hours a week, and I didn't see those kids, is that the same thing? Like, to me, yes, I'm supporting them, yes, but they're growing up, and then they'll grow up the same way I grew up with as a latchkey kid. I didn't have my parents around all the time because they had to work, and it wasn't their fault. They had to do it. They were, just got off the boat from Russia and all this. So to me, it's, money, you could always make, I feel like if you really wanted to.
If money's your only problem, you don't really have a problem.
Yeah, you could always, make, given the reasonable amount of intelligence, you could make money. And what is, I wish, and like you said, my only regret, that was my only regret. If I had realized, like now, living 6 years the way I've been living, if I was making $67,000 a year, I probably could have split that up into 2 years. I could have lived, fine. Well, now with the way I've learned, about money and about, finances and all that stuff. So I would say my only regret was, I didn't realize, back then when I was making all that money that it does dry up. But I think that could have happened to me. I could have been making, $500,000 a year and, and then walk away from it and not have any after a couple of years because, you don't know those. You think it's always going to be there.
I got lucky because fate intervened on me. I was making about 75, 80 grand a year in the gym business in Texas. And I had paid off all my school loans, all my credit cards, and had like 20 grand in the bank. So then I had a condo, and I, had leather couches and big screen TVs and had a nice car. And then one random Thursday, I got drunk and was arguing with my girlfriend or a girl I was trying to be friends with or probably just sleep with. I don't remember her name. But I put some stuff on the stove, and by arguing with her, and I was able to afford an apartment with a long hallway, I went to sleep. And when I woke up, firemen were chopping down my door. And I lost everything I owned, and I walked out of there with a pair of shorts and a T-shirt. And a fireman that was there told me that there must be a reason you're here, so if there's something you're thinking about putting off doing, go ahead and do it. And a week later, I did stand-up. Pretty almost done.
The batteries, you got to switch.